Good afternoon, citizens. Welcome to ECW Live. Today, it's our pleasure to have with us David Peaden, who's the Executive Director of the Florida Homebuilders Association of West Florida. David was a member of the transition team, and he did the research and wrote the report on government efficiency. David, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you for having me. Glad to be here.
David, before we get started, I wanted to take the opportunity for all of our viewers to congratulate you on your recent award, the Chamber of Commerce, Pensacola Greater Chamber of Commerce PACE Award for the 2019 Businessman of the Year. Congratulations, sir.
Thank you very much. It was quite an honor for me and my family to experience that.
That says a lot about your service to the community and the trust that you provide to the members of the Greater Chamber. So even more reason to pick David's brain today on the transition report. So David, tell us a little bit about your background, where you're from, your family, sort of your career here with the Homebuilders.
Well, I was raised right here, born and raised in Pensacola. Went to public schools at Scenic Heights, Ferry Pass, and Washington High School. Graduated from Washington and had the opportunity to go to the University of Alabama in Tuscaloosa, and graduated from Alabama and moved to Jacksonville, Florida for a few years, and to Tallahassee. Then made my way back home in 1997. So it's been great to be back.
Well, Jacksonville's loss has been Pensacola's gain, some would say, in many cases. David, tell us how you came to be involved in the mayor's transition team effort.
Well, the mayor called me and has known me for a number of years and knew my background, I guess, with construction-related businesses and dealing with the planning department or zoning department or engineering, and so all facets of the service aspect of city government. So he asked me to serve on this team, and I was happy to do so.
So you got started in, I guess, late October, early November, and you finished up here just recently. Tell us about how you gathered the data, how you did your research for this report.
Well, it was quite a huge task to think about after we were having a series of meetings, and you're compiling all this data and taking notes and talking to people, and people are reaching out to you, and public meetings, public forums, and it got to an overwhelming point. It's like, how in the world are we going to pare this down? And at the beginning, Quint Studer said, we're only going to need 4 or 5 bullet points. That's it. And so that caught a lot of people off guard, thinking, how are we going to do this? But it kind of expanded since then. But it was really an eye-opening process to meet with city staff and citizens and users of the city services to gain their perspective on what can we be doing better as a city. And so it was a very rewarding task, but it was a time-consuming task as well.
Well, let's get into the report now, David, if we will. Let's talk a little bit about the things you saw. David's got a little short presentation here he's going to talk to. So I'll turn this over to you, sir.
Right. So you can look at the report. There's a few more bullet points, but just a few things we picked out. Planning and Zoning Department. They do a good job for our city. They've got very qualified professional staff. One of the things we heard about was a digital file system for the city. That the way we're doing things now, I guess, is the way that they've always been done, but maybe technology hasn't caught up to us just yet. And I learned during the process that the city planning department and other departments as well are using a computer-based system that was originally developed for the finance department, and everybody else made their software fit what the finance department was doing and try to make it work. So if you're trying to go through different pages of the city system, it's pages upon pages of trying to get to where you need to be. It's time consuming, it's very clumsy. And so that's one of the things that we learned in the process, and understand they are now in the process of getting a more up-to-date system. A grant writer would be beneficial as well. There are so many dollars out there, be it the state level or the national, federal level, that if you know where to go find the dollars, you can bring home the bacon, so to speak. So it's an investment to hire a full-time grant writer, but they could pay their way in the first month of getting dollars back to our community. You could use that for stormwater projects, technology, other city services would benefit. So that was another issue. The cost factor of when considering a new ordinance, and sometimes with government, maybe they mean well, but sometimes they adopt an ordinance that may have an adverse effect that we didn't know it was going to boost the cost of doing business with the city this much. And a lot of times it's well-meaning, but it's the law of unintended consequences. What was passed and what you didn't intend to happen sometimes happens. But if you spend a little more time on the front end evaluating how the ordinances are going to impact us, and I'll give you an example of the CRA document now that it's not been passed by the city just yet, but I think it's coming up in May. The CRA, they spent a lot of time getting community input and had a national land planner go through it, but one of the items in there talked about the ceiling height of a residential building, be it an apartment or a commercial use. If that particular ordinance was in effect now, the new Southtown apartment complexes would not have complied. I mean, so we need to think, okay, why are we doing this? And so those little things that stick out sometimes come back to bite you. So just do a little bit more research on how we're going about drafting our ordinances and how it impacts the community.
David, I want to interrupt for just a second if any of you viewers out there have any questions for David Peaden, the Mayor's Transition Team report leader for government efficiency, please send them in. You can put them on your Facebook page on your comments here at ECW Live, and we will certainly pass them to David should we get some. So David, on this grant writer subject here, you're referring, I take it, to the Planning and Zoning Department. Is that what you're talking about, or the city government as a whole?
As a whole. I mean, any department can utilize a grant writer for whatever project they're working on, and I believe it's even if they're not a full-time city staff person, there's contract employee people who do this for a living. So there's a friend of mine that does it for local governments, and they're writing some grants for Century right now. So, and part of the deal with a contract employee, if they don't get the dollars, then they don't get paid. So they pay for themselves. It's really a good thing to do.
Good point. Yeah, right. They got to sing for your supper in that business. What else did you find, David, as we're moving along?
Well, on the inspection services side, we've got a very capable team of inspectors, and they've got a new leader in place. Bill Weeks retired after many good years for the city, and so we've got Jonathan Bilbrey's on board now, and he's bringing a lot of fresh new ideas to the department. But one thing that came up, and which I put in my report, will it ever happen? We've seen consolidation in our county be discussed, and not so much. But I know that we have the permitting department in Escambia County, the permitting department in the city, and so you've got two different jurisdictions, and at staff and team and accounting and things that take those resources to make those departments function. So this was put in there maybe to look at it. It's always good to but people are very territorial. Some people like doing business with the city, some like the county, some they like different things, and so you get into territories and you get with personality. So, but it's something, if we were really to truly save money for, although both departments are they're enterprise accounts, they're only paid by users of the system. So government tax dollars are not used to subsidize the building department, Escambia County and the city as well. So that's a good thing, but it's a question of why we have two different departments.
Yeah, I want to ask you about that in general. You and I are both have spent time in Duval County, and it's a consolidated city county, and it has its pros and cons depending on what part of the city or county you live in over there, I know. But in general, what do you think about consolidation? And I don't mean to put you on the spot here about Escambia and the City of Pensacola and Century, but what are your views of government consolidation?
Well, there's good size and bad size, but I believe in Duval County, it's worked since 1969. It's a very spread out city, but in our case, there are I think there's too much institutional digging your feet in. I don't see our population or our elected officials going in that direction. I forget when the last time it was on the ballot, but it didn't. It was a straw vote. I can't recall. It's been a while, but it didn't pass. But there are efficiencies that could be gained from that. But as a city resident, I know that I'm going to pay a little bit more for fire and police protection, and we have we have great service in the city. And if you called a 911, somebody be at your house in 3 minutes, no matter where you are. We have good coverage. The county's more spread out, and that's a difficulty what we're seeing now with our volunteer firefighters versus our career firefighters. So it's a big debatable issue. I don't know if I can solve that today, but it's some things may make sense and other things may not. I just don't know.
You observe that the inspection services have on a few occasions missed some items on their planning. Could you talk about that?
Well, and not to pinpoint one crucial job, and inspections and reviewing of plans is important, but there's been a few occasions that during the process of a building under construction that they're almost complete, that an inspector will come in and say, this was missed on the plans, you need to go back and fix it. Well, that fix may cost thousands of dollars at that point in the project, and it's the frustration of the developer or builder who paid good money for a licensed engineer to seal their plans, to stamp them with their approval, and then give them to the city, and then the city inspections or the plans review may come back with a different interpretation. And so those things happen. But I think the key point with that is accountability, and that if people are held accountable for their actions, perhaps they would be more do a better job of making sure the review's correct before they let it loose and out the door.
What else did we see over in inspection services?
The building inspectors they go through training. They have good training available to them, continuing education. But sometimes with being humans, people have different interpretation of the code. And so one week you may have an inspector come in and not say anything about how a hood or a vent was installed or the way it's working. The next week somebody comes in with a different project, same set of plans, saying that's incorrect. And so it goes to the consistency of the enforcement of the Florida Building Code. We have the one of the toughest building codes in the nation. It's a very good one. I think we're very proud of that fact. But it takes a lot of training. It takes a lot of time. But consistency is key when making these calls. The public works and facility and stormwater management and these type things. And this department is so vital to the City of Pensacola. When we talk about our stormwater and our flooding, and just recently the mayor was talking about paving the streets.
Seems like we talk about it quite frequently.
Right, and we it's important to have a good team of professionals that are working for the city that can go out and handle this. And I know that our current director, Derek Owens, has done a pretty good job, I'd say. He's done well, but he's also lost a lot of key people over the last 8 to 10 years of attrition without putting these people, employees back. And to give an example, we used to have a survey crew with the city, and so if we were doing a project, Derek can send a survey crew out there, mark the property, and they're on to the next line of business. Now, surveyors are so inundated with work, it takes they're weeks, if not months out sometimes, to get to a project, which slows down the city side of things. And so the citizens might not understand what's happening to this. Why is it taking so long? Well, the channel it takes to get something going is longer, because we don't have the key personnel to handle those things. So Quint said in our many meetings that we were not there to advocate for city staff in terms of either hiring or firing or making recommendations of what they should do. And sometimes we were pulled in those directions, but I think as a whole we stayed away from that. But from looking at the amount of staff they used to have considered than today, and the economic downturn from 2007 to 2012, there wasn't a lot going on. Mm-hmm. Now we have a lot more demand on the staff, and I think that needs to be recognized by the city administration.
You talk about pay pressures.
Yes. There's always the battle between the private sector and the governmental sector, and I think that some government jobs have better benefits than the private sector, and vice versa. So it's hard to compete if you want to hire, let's say, an additional engineer at this time to come work for the city. They're giving up a pretty good livelihood with a current engineering firm now. Mm-hmm. So it's hard to balance that approach. But I believe in the last 8 years, pay raises have been few and far between, if any, in certain segments of the city staff. And I think that happens with overall morale, attrition, people leaving for whatever reasons. But we need to find a way to make sure our people are compensated with a fair wage that's competitive with the private sector to some extent.
I want to ask you here, I'm going to interject a dirty word, I understand, another study, but do you think it's time for a sort of a pay comparability study? We've gone through the downturn, we're in an upturn, inevitably we'll be in a downturn again. Do you think that this could be the right time to look at this and make sure 8-10 years later that we are working off of a adequate pay comparability system?
Yeah, I think it'd be a fair thing to do. I know that they are working hard within the city now, filling key jobs, and they have some attrition they're trying to address right now. And I think that there's a lot of things that they have maybe in the works, and I think the satisfaction survey that was given to employees months ago was a step in the right direction. They got to give their input. I feel for some of these city employees that have been through a lot, and there's a lot of burden put on them, but the appreciation level isn't high from a lot of folks, be it elected official or be it the citizens out there. But they're doing the best they can with what they're given.
Those are great observations, David. You talk about a deadline, a tickler system, sort of, as we used to say, for departments.
Right. I was told on more than one occasion that it's easier for a department head or a staff person to go from office to office to get a checklist signed than it is to email it and wait for it to come back, complete it, ready to go. And that's just the efficiency of, if you have something on your desk that you need to sign off on to move forward, that you give 24 hours or 48 hours or whatever it may be, but it's got to leave your desk within a certain time frame, and that makes the whole process smoother. And so that was an important piece of that.
I think many of us have worked in organizations where you have the electronic routing systems that are timed and marked, and you can do it all electronically, and you know exactly the time it's taken.
And that goes to on the permitting side as well, with building inspections, a set of plans for a commercial structure or a residential structure. There should be a timeline on it. And another key issue with that is, it was a constant, that sometimes the staff person may have gotten the phone call and they're trying to check and find out the answer, but they don't reach out and let that person know. And so instead of just picking up the phone, hey, I understand what you're saying, let me go find out, there's silence. And then that makes that customer drive down to City Hall, go to the building department or go whatever department, and they want an answer, and that could cut down on that too. So communication is key, and that's something that was brought out too as well in the report. So I think we hit these on these observations. The customer service, I think I just touched on some of those things, but empower city employees to make decisions is important, and without going through a board. And it could be the planning board, it could be any board, that something that's benign, that is small in scale that would take 1 minute to figure out and give a variance maybe on a somebody needs 12 inches for their driveway for a variance. Why would you have to go through a planning board to get that if you're not adversely affecting maybe your neighbor, or maybe it's an open space, you don't even have a neighbor? Easy decisions should be made at the staff level. Now, bigger decisions, if it's a city right-of-way of 25 feet, 15 feet, now we're talking, you have to go through the proper process. But little things that could speed up that would be beneficial is to empower the employees to make useful decisions.
One of the things I noticed in your report was the idea of term limits for boards.
Right.
Term limits for boards, much like we have term limits for elected representatives. This was in your world of recommendations, so we could jump over there real quick.
Right.
And let's talk first about the term limit idea.
Well, the term limits are a good thing, and I'm not really sure where this is on our PowerPoint. I saw it earlier. There they are. So, term limits in the city's respect, we have certain criteria that you have to have on certain boards. You may need an architect. You may need a licensed engineer. You may need these certain skill sets that makes it a little difficult to find good people to serve in those roles. And it's non-paid, it's volunteer, and it takes a lot of time. So, but on the flip side, a term limit of somebody of maybe 8 to 12 years, I think, if you're on a board for an extended period of time, maybe it's time for new ideas. And so that was just a suggestion. But our city is a little different from even the county with what the criteria is for somebody to serve. We do have a lot of boards in the city of Pensacola, over 20 boards. And when you think about staff having to manage 20 boards and 20 personalities, and then the sunshine law that plays into it, and making sure nobody does anything inadvertently to break that, it gets cumbersome. And so those were some of the evaluations, things that I heard from different.
One of the boards you highlighted in your report was the Gateway Review Board. Did I get that right?
Right, and that not to pick on a board, but that's
right.
That's one that I heard over and over again, that it has lived.
That's okay.
It has lived its usefulness, and it was set up many years ago for one thing, but now that board gets into the weeds of maybe some subjects they shouldn't. It's not in their purview, and it's a constant challenge to keep certain boards in their lane and what their purview is. But that goes back to having, I think, a strong legal staff with the city. That legal staff can go in, and when every quarter, I'd like you to see it, but tell them what their role and responsibilities are, and this is why you're here, and then keep it, because it makes it difficult for a staff person to speak out and tell volunteers stay in your lane. But the legal counsel can do that and say, this is what you need to focus on, and this is why we're here. So it's I think we've got more than enough boards in this city, and that they do a lot to keep up with.
Yeah, the burden it puts on city staff, which you pointed out has gotten leaner and leaner, contributes to the delivery of city services, and I think those are great points, and hopefully this will be part of the mayor's efforts here going forward. I notice in your recommendations there's a common theme that seems to run through this, David, and rather than look at the individuals, let's talk about the IT, the information technology thread that runs through many of these. You can pick out whichever one you'd like to highlight here.
Well, the city, in my opinion, is a little behind on the technology scale. So it'd be nice for anybody to log in and see where they are with a project, be it commercial or residential. Or
and they cannot do that now.
Right. You don't know where you are in the queue, and you don't know with the process, and it will take time to do that, but I know that the building official wants to head in that direction. I remember when Santa Rosa County got a system called the Hello system, and you dial in and you know where your permit is. But now you can do things with inspections as simple as taking a picture on your cell phone and texting it to the city.
Yeah.
And you can see that whatever's behind the wall, the insulation or the plumbing or whatever there, that it's been done correctly. It's not something that's not too hard to figure out. So getting the city to get to that point will be very beneficial for everybody, users of the system. We talked about the tracking system and the software, but the inconsistencies in the land development code was another issue that we talked about. And it doesn't have to be totally recodified or reworked, but there are sections that either contradict the other section of the land development code that need to be cleaned up. And that takes, again, staff time to sit down and somebody to go through it to make sure it all flows correctly and it's all legal. So.
Yeah, you had in your report, you mentioned that the county had a system, My Government, something like that. There was a web portal where citizens and builders can look at development documents sort of as they progress through the various systems. And I was wondering if that had any applications to some of the recommendations you have here.
Yeah,
I just heard about it just recently, but people say nice things about it.
Yeah, it's a good way for people to see what's happening inside the government and understand exactly what's taking place. So it's a lot of these things. These will take months and years to figure out and get straight. But at least we have a blueprint that we can work from and go towards that goal.
We have a question pertaining to your discussions about the latitude for the departments to make small decisions without having to go to a board. David, the question is, please give any other examples of what type of decisions that city staff should be able to make in giving variances to ordinances for property owners. And she amplified that by saying, why are these things ordinances if they aren't important? How is the staff held accountable how would they be held accountable for making these decisions without going to the next level of review?
Right.
Have you thought much about that?
Well, I understand what the question is, what they're asking, and yes, there are laws and ordinances in place for a reason. But sometimes in certain situations, benign requests that aren't going to hurt the health, safety, or welfare of a homeowner or a business, it's not going to in the scheme of things make a big deal. If it's something that's major, if somebody's taken, again, with a right-of-way request or infringing on their neighbor's property by 20 yards, but small request that the city staff knows what their parameters are and they can handle without making a citizen go through the planning board, I think would be much easier. And there are it depends how it's handled. Sometimes we've gotten the situation where people are afraid to make a decision, and that doesn't have to go through the planning board at all, but it's put to the planning board. So they don't. It's the CYA thing where I'm not going to let this affect my job and make that decision. And I've seen that happen before too. That's it's hard to exactly drill down and for real life examples of where that happened, but it does happen from time to time.
David, we're up against the clock here. We've got an opportunity for you to sort of wrap this up, if you will, and make any points you'd like to make in closing on your report here.
This has been fun. I've enjoyed this very much, and thank you for the opportunity. This is a good format for people to see what's happening and what you've done with the other transition team members as well. So we do have a vibrant community. We've got, I believe, good leadership. I think we've got good citizens who watch what the government's doing. But there's a good balance on both, and as long as we have that, then the sky's the limit for us. I'm glad that I was as a Pensacola resident who came back, and be able to raise kids here, and we've got jobs now that are
Right.
keeping our families home. So I think we're heading in the right direction.
David Peaden, Executive Director of the Homebuilders Association of West Florida and transition team member, has been with us this afternoon. David, thank you. I speak for many of the citizens here who appreciate your service to the community, and it takes a lot out of your job and your family's time to serve your community in the way you've done it. So again, thank you for being with us there. Businessman of the Year 2019 by the Chamber of Commerce, David Peaden. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
For all of us here at ECW Live, thank you for spending a little bit of time with us this afternoon. We hope you've learned some things, or at least stimulated your thinking about how you can make your community better for you and your family and your neighbors. So on behalf of everyone here, Teresa Hill, who's our partners here behind the cameras and the computers back there, thank you very much, and thank all of you for joining with us. This has been John Singley. I'll see you next time on the next go-around here of ECW Live. Have a great day.